Hello, welcome to Behind the Wall, looking at China and its complicated relationships with the rest of the planet. I'm Stan Grant. US President Donald Trump has long pointed the finger at China for the impact the coronavirus has had on the world. He calls it the China virus. It's a line he continued to push as he addressed the American people today.
It wasn't your fault that this happened. It was China's fault. And China's going to pay a big price, what they've done to this country. China's going to pay a big price, what they've done to the world. This was China's fault. And just remember that.
And unsurprisingly, America's relationship with China featured heavily in today's vice presidential debate as Vice President Mike Pence echoed the president's words. But it's not just the fallout from the virus that's front of mind. The other candidate vying for the second most powerful job in the US, Kamala Harris, accused the Trump administration of sacrificing America's economy for what she called a failed trade war.
You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it.
So where does this leave Australia? When the federal government handed down its long-awaited budget earlier this week, it told a story of optimism, of a future where annual GDP growth falls 1.5% over the next financial year before rebounding to 4.75% the year after. And Treasurer Josh Frydenberg made it clear that it was our major trading partners like China that will help pull us out of freefall.
There's a bounce back in the global economy of 5% next year. For China, it's 8%.
But are these forecasts correct or just wishful thinking? Richard McGregor is a senior fellow at the Lowy Institute and he joins me now from Sydney. Good to see you, Richard. Let's go first of all to the Trump warning or the Trump threat. Is this just bluster when he says China is going to pay? What do you read into it?
Well, it really mightn't matter what Mr. Trump thinks if he loses the election. We've only got about 6 or 4 weeks to go or something like that. But you know, the first thing to say is we're a long way from my good friend Xi Jinping and the sort of love fest that was initially the case between Xi and Trump. Trump started talking about the China virus early this year. Then he dropped it when the two sides were getting on a little bit better and when they were doing the trade deal. Now it's back. And that's, I think, for obvious reasons, because the management of COVID-19, both in the White House and in America more broadly, has been such a disaster. So I think it's Trump trying to shift blame. I think it's, unless he wins, there's not much damage he can inflict on China in the next 3-4 weeks. OK, let's look at that trade war. We heard from Kamala Harris today in the VP's debate saying that America lost this war. 300,000 jobs went. There were widespread bankruptcies. Is that true? If there was a winner or a loser, how did America fare? You know, I don't want to sound wimpy, but it's kind of too early to tell in a way. That's the first thing to say. And the second thing, of course, is that, the terms of the trade war, in other words, massive purchases by China of US mainly agricultural goods and other goods, all of that's gone out the window with COVID-19 and the sort of collapse in economic activity. I think from memory, the trade deal was struck in January, just about the time that the virus was first taking hold in Wuhan. So it's not possible to judge whether the deal worked, whether China is going to stick to the terms of the deal. Certainly they've made some purchases simply because the landscape has changed so radically. But more broadly, you know, this is a generation-long contest between the US and China and maybe China and other countries. So, you know, simple ideas about winners and losers, which I understand in the presidential debates they have to talk about, you can't really judge it at the moment. There is something that's a little bit more complicated, and that goes to Mike Pence's response here, where he says, well, at least we took China on. China was running up big trade deficits, and it certainly was a very hefty trade deficit with the United States, and that this was long overdue. Is he right in saying that? And did China game the Obama administration for all of those years when it was racking up that big trade surplus? Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. I think whatever you say about Trump, and I have little respect for Trump, it's certainly true that he's changed the terms of the debate and the interaction with China. He gained leverage with China in a way that no other administration has managed to do. I think some in the Obama administration quietly look on at what Trump has done and realise that they could have pushed much, much harder if they'd tried. Now, in some respects, Trump has managed to do that because he doesn't respect anything or anybody at all. And he was willing to put tariffs on, and then he was willing to put a second set of tariffs on. And he really did destabilise the Chinese because they didn't know how to handle him, and they thought they did. So it's fair to say that Trump has changed the terms of the debate. And he has focused rather narrowly on trade, a little bit on technology. I think whatever happens with the next administration, be it Trump or Biden, the contest will continue along any number of fronts.
Richard, I want to get your read on the Chinese economy overall. Coming into COVID, it recorded its worst trade figures for 30 years, and the trade war may have fed into that, albeit China's economy is bigger, so that percentage of growth still is quite substantial. It's on track to become the biggest economy in the world. It is still the biggest engine of economic growth. But what's the trajectory?
Well, it wasn't so long ago in February we were talking about China's Chernobyl, and the country was collapsing, the political system was coming apart. Some people were talking about China's Chernobyl. We're a long way from that now. People doubt the Chinese COVID figures, or some people do, but you wouldn't see the amount of economic activity, people out on the streets, traffic jams, if they hadn't managed to tame, by and large, the virus, whatever lies they told in Wuhan at the start. So I think the figures you quoted in your introduction, about 1.5% this year, 8% next year, and that might be the figures in the Australian budget papers, I think that's quite credible. I think many people expect it might even be higher this year, above 2%, because the economy has bounced back quite quickly in the last couple of quarters. Consumption is coming back now. Investment already did. And in fact, so much, the Chinese economy has bounced back so quickly and the US economy has fallen conversely so quickly that the deadline by which China takes over the US as the largest economy in the world has now been brought forward. It's now about 2028 or so. So China's got a lot of long-term problems, but I still think it's got a lot of growth in it. So I think the figures in the budget papers are pretty credible. Richard,
of course, with economic might goes political clout as well. And if Australia is going to be tied to China's coattails, as it has been, particularly for the past 30 years as our biggest trading partner, does that then put us in a bit of a bind? Do we push back as hard? Do we risk running the ire of China when we're going to be relying on them to grow and to bring us back with them?
Well, interesting question. We certainly have been pushing back. If you're looking at, purely rational self-interest, economic self-interest, we never would have done what we've done on a range of fronts, and we're paying a price for that. Meat, barley, perhaps wine, maybe coal. The Chinese, I'm sure, would love to punish us further on iron ore, but frankly, they've got no choice to buy from us at the moment. And if you look at it from the Australian government's point of view, they're trying to ratchet the economy out of a deep slump. They particularly want it growing again next year, towards the end of next year or the year after, when there'll be an election. China trade is very important to that. It's very important to growth. It's very important to the budget bottom line, to tax receipts and the like. At the moment, we're having a little bit of a lull in this sort of China-Australia sort of fight, but there's big structural problems, political structural problems between the two countries, big divisions, all sorts of unsolved issues. So, the relationship is not going to get better quickly. It's an open question as to whether it flows on more and more into the economic relationship as well.
And critical to that, just finally, is the big power relationship, the clash between the United States and China. Even if there is a change in the administration and Biden wins, is that one area of policy where there is bipartisanship, where when it comes to China, China has already been declared a strategic competitor, regardless of who is there. That's the trajectory we're set on, is this big power rivalry, regardless of who's in the White House.
I think that's absolutely right. That is the path we're set on. One reason why US and China won't get much better is because neither sides, frankly, are looking for an off-ramp at the moment. The US thinks they're late to this game. They think China's been getting away with all murder on all sorts of fronts, and so they're looking for ways to push back. They're not looking for ways to ramp it down. And of course, China under Xi Jinping is not in the mood to back down on any fronts. So it's going to get worse. It's going to get more dangerous, and Australia will be swept up into that.
Richard, we're always wiser after talking to you. Thank you again for giving us your time.
Thank you very much, Stan.